divine feminine and serve at her feet. I was destined to become a priestess, even though I still had a lot of learning to do. Around the same time, I spent several summer weeks in England, where I bought a few souvenirs and trinkets. One was a little plaster goddess statue, but I packed carefully in my bags when I headed home. I have kept this with me over the years, and a few years later, this little statue played a huge role in a strange situation that kept me, a young 19-year-old girl, out of big trouble with the authorities. On seeing the statue and the strange shrine I had built to her, they understood that I was different, and not just your average troublemaker. It wasn't until a few years later, when I was formally studying magic and witchcraft, that I understood who this goddess was, and how she had always been with me. Sulis, my gracious mother, my protector, my guide. I also bought 2 books on this trip that had a strange impact on my life. The truth is that, at that age, I had a complicated relationship with reading. I didn't like it. It was hard. My older sister spent all her time reading, always choosing to submerge herself in the thin pages of a book over spending time with her flesh-and-blood sister. As you can imagine, this made me quite resentful, so I teased her more than she probably deserved for reading all the time. The 2 books I bought were a collection of Celtic fairy tales, stories from the Mabinogi, and other tales inspired by Celtic folklore. And these books, like the little statue, have accompanied me as I have moved along the crooked path of my life. Since my first encounter with Sulis, other goddesses have come into my life and acted as guides, lending help and healing, and sometimes administering a sharp swat to point me back on track. I hope that in this book you experience your own magical encounters with the Celtic divine feminine, and that she reveals herself to you in powerful and moving ways. When I was asked by my editor to write this book, I answered with an enthusiastic yes. I didn't hesitate. I knew this was a project I wanted to tackle. My own path to the goddess had been a twisting journey of pain and hurt, but resulted in transformation and healing beyond my imagination. If I could help others find her and make their paths a little easier, I would. I was excited to write about these divine women who have given and taught me so much. As I began writing, however, parts of me froze. I wanted to write a scholarly book on goddesses, one that dove into the deepest depths of each divine being and shared her story with the world. But, as I wrote, I found that the pressure of producing a perfect presentation of each goddess was simply not going to work. There was too little information about some of them, and too much about others. Some had long stories, and others were known only from a single inscription. How could I write something that would do each goddess justice? How could the words I would weave begin to describe these magnificent beings adequately? How could I even include all the goddesses who are connected to the Celtic landscape? To make matters worse, Celtic goddesses are usually not confined to one category. How could I organize this book in a way that made sense? Should I place Rhiannon under the section of mother goddesses, fairy women, horse goddesses, or goddesses of magic? Is Ceridwen considered a lake lady, a mother goddess, or a fairy woman? Should Sulis be placed under a section on healing or water? These divine beings are so dynamic. They take on so many powerful attributes and have so many layers to their stories, both in the historical record and in the context of their modern worship. I agonized over how I could create a book that was correct in every way, until I realized that I couldn't. What I sought was a balance between creating an offering to the Celtic ancestors